Welcome to episode 13 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with Soul Reintegration Guide and co-founder of Living Earth Systems, Sam Schiebold. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking to an incredible sustainable living expert, which might not sound like it's on topic, but really wait till you hear this conversation. So Sam's business, Dirty Alchemy, is a guide to not only living more lightly on the earth, but actually living more lightly in your heart. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but Sam's writing isn't. There is no fluff, there are no vision boards, no positive affirmations, no perfectionism. Her guidance on self-love is so far beyond like the bubble baths and overindulging in things that don't ultimately feel good, which can kind of be standard, like love yourself advice. It's a real deal kind of self-love that loves our awkwardness and our anger and our overeating and whatever else is showing up in our experience. We'll talk about extremes, and while I often share experiences of extreme dieting in hopes of, one day finding the perfect body and living happily ever after, Sam shares her experience of having fallen in love with sustainability and the zero waste movement and permaculture, only to burn herself out in striving for perfectionism and putting her identity into those things. We talk a lot about identity. Because while I once found a safe sort of identity as the healthy one and treated whatever diet I was on like I once might have treated religion, or did treat religion, Sam talks about the identity that she clung to as an environmentally friendly vegan and how it was only in embracing all the parts of herself, not just the parts that she liked or that fell into a certain category, that she really felt free and was able to then create a sustainable lifestyle and begin teaching others to do the same. So, if you, like us, have any tendency towards perfectionism, like if you see yourself as a sort of all or nothing person, or you're either on the wagon or you're off the wagon, never really seeming to get anywhere, you will really appreciate today's episode. I think it's really easy to get into is this idea of what freedom looks like, or what a free spirit particularly looks like. Because, for example, and you and I have talked over the years incessantly about food things, I should say years ago. I had all these years, you had all these years, like being obsessed about getting my body to a particular size and shape and thinking that that alone was going to leave me feeling free. Like a free spirit looks this way and does this thing. And like, I assumed that everything else in my life would somehow fall into place when things looked that way. And of course, that turned out not to be true. So any forced weight loss was never sustainable. And I realized as I read your story that we do this in all sorts of ways. So would you tell us, first of all, about how you woke up to living sustainably and the extremes that you went to for the sort of utopian dream ideal, and how you actually got grounded with all of that, all of the knowledge you gained, and then started implementing it in a healthy way?
Yeah, totally. So just to go into what sustainable actually means, just because it can be used in a lot of different ways. The way I assume you're using it is with environmental sustainability. And that is just the thought and actions and lifestyles that someone can have in order to be on the planet and not be destroying it. And a step beyond that is regenerative, where not only are we not destroying the planet, but we're actually making it better. So walking on a piece of land and living on it for a year, a day, and leaving it a better place than it was before. So just start with a little defining.
Yeah, we're defining. It's funny how sometimes we make assumptions about like, oh, everybody uses this word, but that was really helpful.
Well, and you're also coming from a food.
Right.
I assume your audience is coming from more of a food perspective, and a sustainable lifestyle
Yeah,
could be like a sustainable diet versus,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But I guess when I was in college, I think I was like 19. I felt passion for the first time. And that was in a dormitory cafeteria. I was studying for like a physics final, and there was a group of students at a table next to mine, and they were all excited. They brought in a bunch of bags of apples, and I'm from Michigan. I went to University of Michigan, and so we grow apples there. And they, over the course of an hour, maybe two, they were cutting up apples and excitedly talking. And by the end of their get together, I, of course, make my way over, wander over there, and just try and figure out what they're doing. And it ended up being a student organization with the mission of getting local foods, local organic foods into the university cafeteria system. Mm-hmm. And for anyone who's been to a big university, there's so many people involved, and in that entire system, tens of thousands of students, and just the act of systematizing getting local foods into there, it would make a really, really huge impact. So they were making applesauce to be used in one of the dormitory cafeterias. And I don't know why I got so excited. I mean, I immediately joined the organization and just was soaking in all of the information I could about local food. And a lot. Seems fairly common knowledge these days, but the average meal goes 1,500 miles to get to your plate. So we import a lot of produce and meats and all of our foods that we're bringing in, and that has a huge carbon footprint. And pretty much
that you say that, this is fairly common knowledge. I think it floats around out there, but that was new to me. And it's like, I'm sort of thinking of the things that I think of as common knowledge. Like, well, everybody knows that restrictive dieting is going to really mess with their heads and their bodies, right? But no, sort of look around at the mass population in general, like it may be out there, the information may be out there, but sometimes people don't know, and sometimes they don't hear it until they hear it a particular way or from a particular source that really resonates.
Yeah. And it was
to share is very useful.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, great. So I was actually vegan at the time, more out of like a personal challenge than for any other reason. I enjoy challenging myself, and I don't know, it was something that I fell into. And my mom went vegan, and I was like, oh yeah, I can try that out. And of course I'm a natural researcher, so just started soaking in all of the knowledge, and of course eating local and thinking about environmentally sustainable foods really fell into a vegan lifestyle. And it's one of the arguments that a lot of vegans have for being vegan, because it is an environmentally conscious decision where you are choosing not to put animals into really terrible conditions. And there's a lot of like, I wish I actually knew the numbers. Maybe I can send you some numbers after the fact, but the amount of water and land resources that go into actually growing animals to eat is really high. There are, of course, alternatives to this. That is not the case overall. And eating sustainably, humanely local meat and animal products is actually a environmentally conscious decision too, but that's another topic. So anyway, looping back around, that was my immediate jump into sustainable living. It was through food, and food was it's a decision that every person can make in their day-to-day life that does make an impact. And so in Michigan, I've been surprised, like having lived on Maui and now Southern California, Michigan has been at least Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I went to college, that's been the most local food conscious place I've lived. I know that. Are you in Seattle now? Are you in Portland?
I'm on the other side of the state, but I did live in Seattle in recent years. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really conscious place to live. And, it's just been so interesting that like I was so grateful to be in that place at that time and have a huge community around local food and small farmers and going to the farmers market. And there's just such a warm, beautiful story and feeling in that entire movement. So that's really where I jumped in, and a lot of things snowballed from there. I ended up minoring in environmental science in college, and it was very, very doom and gloom. Like you pretty much learn that we're screwed. You pretty much learn that the planet can't carry the amount of burden that we're putting onto it in terms of carbon emissions and just all of the things put together. And I had a lot of dark nights of the soul of just feeling completely disempowered because it felt like we were just past the point of any sort of return. And then the biggest turning point with that was finding permaculture, which is short for permanent agriculture or permanent culture. And it is a way of growing food and setting up a lifestyle in which everything is completely connected and aligned with nature, and using nature as the framework in which you want to create your systems out of. And I feel like I'm using a lot of jargon right now. So you're going to have to tell me if that makes any sense.
Well, and I actually didn't know that. I've heard about permaculture for years and did not put together something as simple as the fact that it's permanent agriculture. And that ties so much together for me.
Yeah. And I was, even though a lot of the stuff I'm doing now is related to permaculture and not related to permaculture, it was something that was such a breath of fresh air at that moment in time, because it showed me that the solutions already existed and they were as simple as following nature. So, yeah.
Beautiful. So where did that take you from there? So you obviously didn't stay in Michigan.
No, I graduated college right around the time that I found permaculture, and I ended up getting my permaculture design certification, which taught me a lot. It's only usually a 10-day program, which is not enough to actually
I wouldn't
teach you much. And that was right around the time that I moved to Maui, and so I was in Michigan working with a permaculture design firm, just pretty much learning as much as I could in action and using the job to learn as much as I could. And then went to Maui just by someone inviting me to stay in their home. And I was like, yes, I will do that.
What did you think that was going to be when you envisioned Maui? So you'd fallen in love with this permaculture thing and all of, the beautiful community that you had there. Did you think that Maui was going to be like an explosion of that?
Totally. Oh my gosh. And it wasn't at all. But it's so a lot of permaculture stuff is based around trees and orchards and perennial plants. So you can imagine you're setting up a garden like you would a forest. So if anyone's listening that has a garden, if you leave it for a few weeks, it's going to die in the middle of summer. But if you leave a forest for weeks or years or decades, it gets better. And you don't really need to do anything. So how can we, so that's how nature designs a garden. So how do we follow those nature's principles in order to build our food systems?
So ultimately you're designing something that's going to offer more ease, not just more work. 'Cause I think people hear all of this stuff, trying to live sustainably and grow their own food. And oh my gosh, it just seems like so much work, and who can do that with a job? But what you're saying is that this is something that is actually less work in the long term.
In the long term, but yes, okay. So it does take work. And a lot of people in the permaculture movement do market around the fact or the concept that once you set this up, you don't have to do anything. And that's just not true. Whenever you set up a large system, you are going to have to do a certain amount of maintenance. And I think that's a really beautiful part of it, because it is encouraging you to form a relationship with nature.
And I love you say that too. Like we were talking in the beginning, I was telling Sam that she describes things in her blog posts and in her writing so elegantly, but with absolutely no bullshit. And I feel like with this whole idea of being a free spirit, some people might be like, oh, I'm free and I have all of this convenience and I don't, everything is sort of, pre-packaged and we don't really think much about it until we think of actually having to do something other than that. And then it feels like, oh, well, that must mean I won't be free. I'm going to have to work so hard and toil in the earth and all of these things. But it's not that black and white.
Right.
There's beauty in the effort.
And there's beauty in the community and the connections that come out of it. So one of the permaculture principles is sharing abundance. And if you've ever had a fruit tree in your yard, when it's actually fruiting, you have so much fruit. Like right now we have, we have like 20 orange trees on the property we're on, but even just one of them, we can't eat all of those oranges. There's hundreds of oranges. And so it's a demonstration of abundance. And with that abundance, you are going to share it. So it inherently encourages community. And it's my belief that is one of our purposes here on earth, is to connect with other human beings, because it's our ultimate teaching ground and through our relationships with other people.
Absolutely. So were you able to begin implementing this when you got to Hawaii? Or what happened? What happened when you got there? And what was different from what you were envisioning?
Oh, it was significantly different. I thought that there was going to be a huge local food movement, and there wasn't. There's people growing food, but most of the industry is around tourism. So there's less encouragement for building community, which was difficult for me. And then there wasn't like a transferable, all of the lessons that worked in Michigan, which is a 4-season environment with a very harsh winter, did not apply in Hawaii, where there is no winter, because for one thing, in the winter, pests die. Yes, food dies and plants will lose their leaves and everything, and you can't really get that much food out of it. But you also it naturally kills all the pests. So suddenly, in a place that is alive and growing and lush year round, you have to use other tactics and strategies in order to manage pests that also want to eat your food. So when I got there, I was just like, man, I know I understand there are principles under all of this, but all of the actual practical applications that I had learned in Michigan didn't really apply on Maui. So it actually took me 9 months to return to permaculture, because waiting for examples and a mentor and people to work with, and it came like a huge floodgate, but it took a lot of time and waiting and patience.
And how was the experience emotionally? Because I know you talked a lot about in your writing just having, like we said in the beginning, this utopian dream of what this is going to be like to be totally, I don't know if you were thinking off the grid or what it was, but how did you have to sort of navigate that period for yourself to make this something you could actually do and love and make these slow changes?
Yeah. So emotionally, there was so much emotion on Maui, from a bunch of different angles. Where can I go with this? So it was my first experience living anywhere except for the place that I grew up. And I learned a lot about...
in Michigan?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And so I met there's a huge range of people, because there's a lot of people who are relocating to Hawaii, which is also the case in California. A lot of people relocate to California. So there's a huge modge podge of people, and you don't actually understand what their upbringings are and what their unconscious agreements are. So
what does that mean?
Like the norms, what is normal for them, what is moral for them. There's a completely different codes of ethics, and we can't just completely different perceptions of reality. And most of us go through life assuming that everyone perceives reality the exact same way that we do. And then you start meeting different people and with completely different backgrounds, and that's not at all the case. So going into agreements and different contracts and relationships with people, suddenly realizing that when I say oranges, they're hearing apples, or that's what they think it means. It was really shocking and unsettling in some ways, until I really learned to set some serious boundaries and learn a lot about communication.
So it was really,
but I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sure it was really a time of growing up, and you're working with other people, but through other people, it's self-discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you were navigating new relationships, sort of figuring out how this was all going to work for you. How did it become something that was settled and grounded and just a lifestyle? Because obviously now you have such an ease and flow, and you're like, this is how we can get to know ourselves. This is how we can take care of the earth, and not this is how we can work with the earth, I should say, rather. How did you find a place of ease?
Time. And I mean, you and I both have a background in kind of extreme living, and
yes. And if you want to talk about that, I'm sure we would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, just doing the whole raw vegan thing while you're in it, like, kind of doesn't feel extreme, and then you're out of it and you're like, holy cow, why did I actually do that?
So have you done anything dietarily that felt different or challenging? Like you said, you like to challenge yourself before veganism.
I mean, I remember as a kid, like, I didn't grow up in a religious household, but I would always do Lent just as a personal challenge to myself. I would give up candy, or I would give up meat, or just random stuff for no reason other than it was an interesting challenge. So I know there's a part of me that enjoys testing my limits. I think the issue that came up with both veganism and environmentalism, and I'm sure it's transferable to many other isms, is kind of completely making my identity that thing, and molding and changing myself in order to be more like that thing. So when I was a vegan and things stopped feeling good, because probably for the first 6 months, I felt awesome. Maybe even the first year and a half, I felt great and was super excited about the community elements of it, super excited about just what I saw my impact of was being. And it just felt so right and clear and the way to go. And then I stopped feeling good and I started having health issues. And because of the community around it, it wasn't the veganism that was wrong in that perception. It was me. I was doing something wrong. And I'm doing air quote right now. Instead of viewing something as, oh, this thing is not working for my unique body, unique needs, and me as a person. Instead, it was, I'm wrong. I'm doing something wrong. Veganism is right. So if I'm not doing veganism, I'm bad. And like, just all of these like moral weirdness that came up. And then all of a sudden, because of my identity was attached with the veganism, if I strayed away from it, I would be losing my identity and I'd be losing my community. So that, and I mean, same with environmentalism. I've definitely gone to extremes with that, of even doing going zero waste is a lifestyle choice in which you try and produce zero trash. So you're bringing you're pretty much making all of your own food. You're buying nothing from packages, and it's awesome. I encourage everyone to try it at least for a week, just to see it. It kind of shows you ways in which you can lessen your impact, but it's also something with suddenly if you're doing it for many months straight and you can't buy that one thing that you really love because you're so attached to the rightness of those actions, it can be kind of make you feel like you're drowning.
Yeah. I mean, do you ever turning into sort of like the diet binge cycle? Like I'm zero waste, I'm zero waste, I'm zero waste. Oh my God, I bought this one thing. Well, this thing won't hurt and that thing won't hurt. And then you go on kind of a shopping binge. Does that happen to people?
I mean, I've experienced it, yeah. So it happens to me at least.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the it's what doesn't serve us about it is the whole idea of zero. And I get it. And I've only come to that term or like heard that term for the first time in the last couple of months. And I think it's beautiful and it's really impacting the way that we live our lives. But I think when we slap even the label zero on something, it gives us no room for transition and nuance. And like you were saying, we can put our identity into that thing. And then who are we if we don't have that identity or if we mess up that identity? And then going back to the food thing, I was thinking about how, we come from tribal living and we don't have that anymore. And I think that sometimes we find that within these communities, like food communities, diet communities, zero waste or environmentally friendly living communities. And we don't want to stray from that because it feels like rejection, like death, like we're losing something.
Yep, totally.
And I think it just has to become safe for us to be individuals and to work step by step towards a more beautiful, supportive way of living in every way without being shut out by people that have similar belief systems. And the thing is, I think what's even more important is for us to be grounded enough in ourselves to be all right if people judge the way that we do things, even if it's slower, even if it's step by step.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement. And I know that you and I are both familiar with shadow work. Have you talked about that at all on this podcast?
Exactly. No, I don't think we've talked with anybody specifically about shadow work. I was going to ask you that next. How does that tie into all of this?
Yeah, so it ties in exactly to what you were just talking about of accepting ourselves fully. And so shadow work is accepting all of the elements of ourselves and the parts of ourselves that we've suppressed or rejected. And through that process, we can pretty much change our lives. And so if you see people who are vain as being bad people, it's okay. I'm going to see the vanity within myself. And, I see overeating as being a bad thing. So how is overindulgent a part of me? And it's really opening up and seeing ourselves as multidimensional, multifaceted people, and instead of this one thing. And a lot of us, especially women, have this attachment to being good girls.
Yes.
So when we're able to open up to the fact that we can be bad girls and lazy girls and pretty girls and ugly girls and like all of the different aspects of being a woman and being a human, then we're not putting ourselves into any box and we're not going to fall into the trap of extremism.
Yes, which is so liberating. And like what you're saying with seeing the vanity in yourself or seeing the overindulgence with yourself, it's not so that you can shame yourself. It's really so that you can love those parts too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yes. And see, I feel like we're so disconnected from our bodies and we've been so trained out of self-love and self-trust. And this is what we should be following. Like when you hear that, you get that, it feels so open and expansive in the heart area. And that's what we follow. And yet what we've been trained to follow is like, pushing and discipline and falling in line with culture. And if it doesn't feel good, then maybe we should follow that because we've got to be good.
Yeah. And I mean, the other side of it is also feeling the full spectrum of feelings and emotions within our bodies and not abandoning ourselves. Cause I mean, that's a lot of the work that I'm in now is actually going into the emotions of all the full spectrum of emotions, including anger and rage and sadness and happiness, and being present with yourself. And in that we can really uncover and, well, not uncover, recover our full selves, which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. And I love that you caught it and even went further, like not even uncover, but recover. So like loving it up into the light, all of these little parts of ourselves that we're like, oof, not that. Or, you know, we're trying to slap a positive affirmation on ourselves when we don't actually need to. We just kind of really need to see what's there with clarity so that we can love it fully.
Yeah. Yeah, or at least feel it fully.
Yes.
Maybe it won't feel like love. It'll just feel like an experience of being a human.
You're right. You're right. I guess my experience has been through feeling it fully, love comes, even if it's just an appreciation for the part of myself that has experienced something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find that women who, you know, have gotten into this, I'm going to save the earth thing, or I'm going to have the perfect environmentally friendly diet thing, are women that come to you that you end up having to, as if it's such a burden, that you end up going to this sort of work with them, this sort of shadow work?
Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone needs to be doing shadow work personally. So yeah, totally.
And where did you get the name Dirty Alchemy? That's something that I wanted to ask you early on and I forgot.
Yeah. It came to me a few years ago when I first wanted to expand on the experience of being a modern woman within a looking back, turning back to nature, returning to nature sort of lifestyle. And it feels a little vulgar in a really good way. I don't know. It's like, it's just, there's something about it that like feels like, I don't know. But how I see it now is, so a really key component about regenerative agriculture is building soil. So in this day and age, we're at 1% of the topsoil of our earth, and topsoil is the only the primary space in which we can grow food, and we're at 1%. So it's also a part of the carbon cycle, so we can actually sequester carbon from the atmosphere. That means bringing the carbon that is in the atmosphere, overburdening the atmosphere, we can bring it back into the earth through topsoil. And one of the ways to do that is by composting. And composting is the act of taking quote unquote waste. So that's organic waste, whether that's food scraps or feces or cardboard, anything organic like that, that can be biodegraded, broken down. And you're using a myriad of creatures, from little bugs to fungus to bacteria and worms to, I mean, they naturally do this in the forest. If you look at the leaf litter that comes down, it's decomposed by all of these little creatures. And from the process of decomposition, it's unlocking the nutrients that are in that compound and making it accessible for new growth. Wow. So for me, that's dirty alchemy. It's allowing that decomposition to unlock the potential for new growth and abundance and fertility.
And
yeah.
Maybe the analogy is clear. But in case it isn't for anybody, how do you tie that into shadow work?
Yeah. Okay. So shadow work is, you're pretty much, or I mean, I would say it's more about not like kind of drawing away from the term of shadow work, but any work within the subconscious mind. I see that as kind of going into the dirt and seeing what is there. And it's pretty much the fertile ground that is the manifestations of our lives. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about earlier about affirmations, and usually people who are in the spiritual community, in the new age community, they're familiar with the concepts of vision boards and affirmations. And a lot of people do it and try it and they feel excited about it, but nothing ever comes of it. It's because those are all things that are happening within, you're kind of putting things into your conscious mind, when really what manifests in our lives is what is stewing and brewing and decomposing and growing within our subconscious mind.
Well, and I think it can just be another outside in approach of I'm being a good girl. Like I'm doing affirmations, I'm being so positive. Yeah. I'm such a positive thinker. And really there's so much going on underneath that it's barely even a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of Band-Aids, the post that made me want to reach out to you, and this is going to go into subconscious states and how we access that, is the post that you wrote on how to use altered states for healing. And then in parentheses, you said without drugs and alcohol. And my ears perked up when I heard that, or when I read that, because that's something that I get so excited about, is just our own internal potential for healing. Like our body holds everything, the potential for every experience. And I think that we tend to Band-Aid things or try and shortcut things. And I don't think those are real answers. So reaching into this post, from your perspective, what is an altered state?
So an altered state is, I use a really loose definition of it, but it's any state in which you are having a different consciousness than when you're just kind of sitting there. And there's so many different ways to access this. It can be through deep breathing, you feel an altered state. Mm-hmm. Through sleeping, you're in an altered state. From watching TV, you're pretty much in a hypnotic state. And I think being conscious of that, it kind of opens people up to coming back to their body and feeling a vast range of altered states in which you don't actually need drugs or alcohol to achieve. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people there are plenty of people who turn to that glass of wine at the end of the night in order to feel relaxation, where, okay, if you are in a looser definition of an altered state, you may be able to do a yoga class to attain that, and or do a guided meditation, or go for a run, or watch a TV show in order to experience that altered state of relaxation.
Right. And people tend to think oh, that's harder. Why should I do that when I can just take something? But to me, that's not, and this is just a personal thing for me that just feels so important to me. That's not freedom, to be dependent on an outside substance, taking something to experience something. I want to know that I am capable of making the shifts that I need to make within myself. What's your experience been with Kundalini yoga?
I love Kundalini yoga. We've already bonded over this, of our love for Guru Jagat.
Oh my God. I love
so yeah, she's from the Rama Institute in Venice, and I could just listen to her talk all day long and be very content. And I mean, a lot of the teachings with Kundalini yoga, it is taking you into altered states and working with the subconscious mind and kind of distracting the conscious mind so that a lot of crazy shifts can happen within the subconscious mind. And it's a lot of breath work. It's a lot of chanting. And I mean, through it, I've gotten really excited about the power of sound. And I remember I went to a Kundalini retreat over the summer, and there was a woman there who was went to school for opera and is currently a violin. She literally builds violins, and she was talking, and a Kundalini teacher, and she was talking about, okay, in this day and age, we are experiencing music and sound mainly through earbuds. And when you look at our entire body, we're just covered in receptive cells. We're pretty much like just an instrument of feeling and experiencing. And just imagine being in a day and age, however many years ago, in which the way we experienced music was a full body experience, and how much we're starving our entire body of cells, the millions of cells, from sound vibrations just by sticking in an earbud versus going to a full symphony orchestra. And it was like, wow, that is definitely a different definition of nourishment that I had never thought of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're so cut off just by being cut off from nature. We're so cut off from these natural forms. It seems so cheesy to say, like, a natural high, we need to get high on our own supply. But seriously, people don't know. Like, until you know, you don't know what you're out on and I should say what the natural state of the body is when we're not so cut off, or when we're not so swamped by everything that's going on in the subconscious. And I wanted to see if you would touch on, for anybody who's listening to this and they're like, whoa, what are we even talking about? Why do we want to go into the subconscious, and how is that impacting our lives if we haven't addressed what's going on down there?
Yeah. So we have our conscious mind, in which we are having our understanding and feeling our thoughts and experiencing our thoughts. And, I see the wall in front of me and I'm looking at my computer. All of that is happening in the conscious mind. And that conversation with my boyfriend, that's in the conscious mind, where there's a lot of things that the subconscious mind is pretty much everything. I mean, okay, I'm like, there's so many things I could say right now. And pretty much our conscious mind is we're taking in about 5% of the information that is in the world around us at any given moment in time. So 5% of you just sitting in your room right now is being accepted and interpreted by your conscious mind, where there's so much other information that's happening. And going back to shadow work, I mean, from the time of our birth, we are shoving things into our subconscious mind just by having traumatic experiences. And by being able to go back and uncover what we had fragmented from our perception of who we are and what we are actually doing with our lives, going back to those time periods in which we are able to resolve trauma, even like the trauma of our birth. All of those things are living and stewing in our subconscious mind and directing our perception of reality. I'm not sure if that makes any sense.
And our perception of reality being the way that we experience life.
Yeah.
In the simplest terms, if we're unhappy, there's some stuff going on that we're not seeing clearly. It's just that we're not seeing ourselves completely. So a couple of last questions for you. I want to read this quote that I got from your website. So you say, small strategic steps are what bring consistent change to the world that snowball over time. This can be fun and easy, and yes, you will find a deeper connection to yourself in the process. Just like composting transforms the old and dead into new, vibrant life, the dirty alchemy of aligning your life with the earth will allow parts of yourself that are not serving you to transform and unveil what was under the surface all along. So, small strategic steps. What are some small strategic steps for somebody who's living completely disconnected from themselves and the earth, just to start with, just to start connecting them a little bit?
I mean, spending time outside, that's a small strategic step. Also, I think I'm definitely stepping into a new part of my life in which I'm really understanding and bringing in the importance of actually feeling our emotions. So, and we had already talked about this in this interview, or this podcast episode, but in terms of a challenge for everyone that's listening, if you can set a timer on your phone to go off every hour or two. And whenever that timer goes off, actually stopping and feeling your body and perceiving, okay, thinking of your skin as this separator between the external world that's happening and the internal world, and realizing that we have this universe or multiverse of things happening within our bodies that we can be experiencing. And okay, if we perceive our emotions as just an indicator of extremely important information, okay, so when that timer goes off, I'm just going to feel and experience what's happening within my body. And when we're able to bring that presence in, it's funny how many behaviors that we quote unquote don't like can fall away, because we're actually giving ourselves the presence that we need and we're searching for.
Absolutely.
And then, I mean, eating whole foods from organic local sources is a great opportunity to build community and to feel better. That's a small strategic step for sure.
Absolutely.
And what else can we bring in very easily? Yeah, I mean, if you can start a garden, start a garden.
For sure, that's the dream. I love that, because I feel like these are things that we hear, like, yeah, go outside and feel your feelings, but are we really doing it? Like, are we getting our skin touching the earth? And are we doing more than being like, oh, well, I'm feeling my feelings, I'm irritated, okay, I felt them? Are we actually like feeling the sensations of our body? So there's a lot of depth to this. It's not just a sort of surface pathing. It's very, very powerful practices.
Yeah, and not just going, okay, here are my 5 minutes outside. I'm going to quickly walk around while listening to an interview. And no, actually go outside and like look at a leaf and experience the leaf and be fully present with nature instead of just passing through it.
Yeah, you're so right. And you're totally talking to me, because that's what I do. I go outside with my podcast, and that's but it has been a step for me to just say, like, you know what, Randy, you have got to get fresh air. Like, because it's the acknowledgement that we are nature. Like, it's not like nature outside and we're this separate thing. Like, we are nature and we need to be connecting to that. And I definitely could deepen the practice for myself. So thank you for that. Lastly, I define a free spirit as you when you get to be completely yourself. So any of us, when we are just getting to be our completely authentic, that's such an overused word, but completely clearest expression of ourselves. How would you define it for yourself?
Being a free spirit?
Yeah.
Being fully present in my body, unattached to time. That feels right. And I don't know. I'm not sure. Can we rephrase the question?
Actually, I don't think you need to add anything to that, because so few of us are being that present in our bodies. And I think that is when we are expressing as our freest, truest selves, because it doesn't mean, to take us all the way back to the beginning, that free-spiritedness looks a certain way, or that when you're a free spirit, you're nice all the time, or you're sweet all the time, or you're happy all the time. It's like, no, you are yourself all the time. So I think
and it's something for me that the reason why that came up is a lot of what I'm personally working on is getting out of a hurried state. It's something that absolutely takes me out of my flow and out of my body, is that thinking about the future all the time. I think it's really important to think about the future and plan and have a to-do list. But in terms of when you're actually experiencing your day, instead of looking at that leaf for 1 minute or having a slow conversation that only takes 2 minutes. And those are like the little things that add so much value and meaning to our lives that I know for myself, I really easily will bulldoze past just because of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's to go back to the subconscious stuff. That's our conditioning. And we don't feel often safe if we're not in a hurry and checking things off our to-do list and like go, 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 go. But I'm so right there with you. That has been such a focus for me right now too, is consistently reminding myself, like, you're not in a hurry. Like, take time. Like, you're doing this. You're not doing all of the things on your list right now. You're just doing this.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you would like to share with people? Is there a sort of ideal person that you like to sit down and work with, or that you like to have in your mentoring programs?
Yeah, I prefer working with women. I know.
Well, I do too. I do too. People say, like, why don't you work with me? Not that I wouldn't, but I'm with you.
And it's been really fun to work with women who are already in the spiritual movement and who are kind of awakened to those ideas, because most of them aren't working with the subconscious. They're just working by way of, I'm just a high vibe girl and I'm going to like be positive and love everything.
Yeah.
And eventually you realize that that doesn't work very well. I love working with those people because it's amazing how quickly they can actually make change because they're like, oh yeah, I know my power. I'm just like, when you can actually tap into the subconscious parts, that's when it's really awesome. And then, so we've talked a lot about dirty alchemy today. I also have a permaculture business with my partner called Living Earth Systems. And so anyone who's interested in learning about regenerative agriculture, how they can actually implement that in their life in a very practical, tangible way, or want designer consultation, they can find us at livingearthsystems.com too.
Amazing. Awesome. And we will attach all of those links for anybody that wants to check it out further. All right. Thank you so much, Sam. This was beautiful.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. This was super fun. I'm so glad I got to be on here with you today.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Before I wrap things up, I want to invite you to come join the private Free Spirit Academy Facebook group, where I post videos, offer support, and answer questions on all things food and body freedom. And you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet. I hope to see you there.